Recording in progress. Hi, we're back. We took a little hiatus for a couple weeks. I had some issues with my face, truth be told. But here we are, we're back. And this week on Be Well with Bridget, I'm Erin. We're going to be talking about the spiritual aspect of being well and where that lands on the circle of life and why spirituality is an essential part of our health journey. So I'm a firm believer that if there are things lacking in your life because you are disconnected from your spirituality, then a lot of times we find ourselves in a lot more anxiety, maybe a little bit more depression, there's a little bit more chaos in our life. We're not really finding where our source of life is coming from. And so spirituality, I think, is one of the main factors of being well, because we are we're created body, soul, and spirit. And when we ignore that spiritual piece of it and we just focus on the body, or we just focus on the mind, or we focus on both of them together, but we neglect the spiritual side, is oftentimes where we see ourselves repeating cycles, repeating patterns of behavior. We call it kind of going around the mountain, or which I know you have gone through some different dieting cycles or lifestyles, or we can just never find that groove. And to me, I personally and professionally believe it's because we are spiritually disconnected from our creator, or we just don't even think that that needs to be an important part of our life when it comes to our being well. So you guys learned about it in your class, Bridget. What were some components that maybe a light bulb came on for you when it comes to including the spiritual aspect of the circle of life?
I think the biggest thing for me was to actually and they talked about all kinds of different forms of spirituality for people, but for myself, just finding a place where I can just stop and focus and kind of turn it over to the Lord, just to take away my anxiety and my stress. Because truthfully, personally, when I started doing that, and you've helped me through that process, when I stop, just sit, close your eyes, or and that, for me, that's the best thing, is to ground myself to the floor with my feet and then just kind of let it all go. So it was just, in classes, we really talked about, everybody has a different form of finding their spirituality. Some may do it like I do. I know you to go on walks and talk out loud and pray out loud. And sometimes that's good for me too. Sometimes I'm in the gym and we're doing specific movements. Like 2 weeks ago, when I was having a rough time, but you just wouldn't know, but I was quietly praying, because I had so much anxiety going on. I just kind of needed to let it go. And it was that moment. So I think it looks different on a regular basis.
Sure.
I think it's good to sit and ground yourself and breathe and just let your mind go, and just let it all be. I think it's good to have a regular cadence of that. I need to do better at that, but I do think it's good to have a regular cadence of it. So my point to that was, I think it opened up a lot of different avenues. Like before, I wasn't open to even looking. I just needed to open my eyes and just see that the opportunity's there. Take it.
Yes, absolutely. When you were talking about grounding, I actually read a post recently, which if you don't know what grounding is, it's essentially taking off your shoes and walking around in your bare feet, whether it's outside or in your home or whatever it is. This might sound a little weird, but the earth does give off frequencies. And because it's created by the master creator of the universe, the Lord, and there's frequencies that we are constantly resonating off of our body through our body. And so that grounding is a way for our body to come back in alignment. Which sounds pretty new agey, maybe in some regards, but if you think about kids that run around without shoes on all day, grounding, some of the benefits, I'll just read them to you. This is from Ancient Nutrition. This is not my resource, but I want to source where my resources are coming from. But Ancient Nutrition, grounding reduces inflammation, helps reduce stress hormones. It can help you sleep better. It can help decrease pain, and it can help increase energy. So taking that moment during the day where maybe things are starting to feel a little chaotic, yeah, just like you said, absolutely. Taking a pause, maybe taking off your shoes, go for a walk outside. To me, like you said, I like to just pray out loud or write in my journal to the Lord and just seeking his heart on, what does it mean to be well today? Like today, because what we do today will affect our approach for tomorrow. And what we do today will carry over into the next day. But what we do today is not going to be, how do I want to say it? Like today has enough concerns of its own. And so what we do today is going to be necessary for how we can get through tomorrow. So just taking that time to sit before the Lord, or just, if you don't believe in God, I'll be praying for you. But if just taking that time to kind of center and focus on what it is that you're feeling within your spirit, because we are spirit, soul, and body, and just releasing, your anxiety, your cares, and sitting with the Lord and just asking him, what does it look like to be well today so that it carries over into tomorrow, is really one of the tools that I use with clients who currently aren't incorporating that. Because when we allow him to be our teacher, then it gives us room to, at our deepest places, to release control to him. And so in a life where we're constantly controlled by, our time, our budget, our schedule, our kids' lives, our family lives, all of these different spheres of influence, taking that step back and taking, 15 minutes first thing in the morning, maybe during your lunch break and before you go to bed at night, just to center yourself around his presence and asking him what it looks like to be well from his perspective, I think is really a missing piece to people being well.
Right. And it's almost cleansing,
Yes.
to just give it all up.
Yeah.
I actually had this conversation with myself out loud this morning. Like,
I love those.
I'm just I am letting this go. I have to, because if you don't, then it really does start being it consumes you.
Right.
And then leads to more and more problems.
Yep. So how would you say, because I've witnessed you walk through growing closer to the Lord and seeking him out on some counsel in your life, how would you say that has changed your approach to being well? Is it something that's been significant for you, or is it just, are you still getting into the groove of like giving it over to him?
I would say so, and I'm still honestly I still struggle with it at times.
Sure.
I'm a person who, we just had this conversation. I'm just a person who wants to help everybody, fix everything for everybody, be strong for everybody. I mean, it's me being a mom, it's me being a social worker. It's kind of how I'm built. So so I still struggle with it, but the moments that, like this morning, I really try to embrace those moments when they do happen. And I really do think that I am growing in that area. There's always room for for growth, but
Right.
it's certainly made a difference in a lot of different most recent life aspects
Yeah.
for me, honestly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
And
yeah, you're right. No,
you've
yeah,
had quite the change since we met.
I have. Some people are like, what happened? What happened?
Quite the I mean, growth over.
Yeah.
I,
So, yeah, if we are growing in our faith and in our spirituality, then it's, the Bible calls it going from glory to glory to glory. And so we're essentially becoming, ideally more like Jesus in our walk when we continue to give things to him and to strip away the things that hinder us from becoming more like him. And so I just was at a season in my life where he was like, there's more to this than what you're currently doing. And if you want it, it's available to you. And it has made a lot of things in my life so much more easier to manage. But the hard things like that he wants me to give up are things like control and, knowing what the outcome is going to be. And because obviously like if I want to get a client from A to B, then there's a set progression. And it's not always like that with him. He gives me like, hey, this is the end goal. And yes, you are going to get there. But it's going to be in my timing, in my way. And so I need you to be patient. And that's probably been the hardest struggle for me, is just being patient with the process of what, he's doing and fulfilling some things in my life that I've been praying for. But I notice with me, my training has changed totally. I'm like so much less obsessive with having to get to the gym, and I don't have as much, I think for a while there, even like with food, even with Edison, I'm like, oh, we are not eating that. It's super detrimental to your body. Like I can't, we're just not going to do that. And then over time, he's like, don't you trust me with your body? And don't you trust me with your training? And don't you trust me with Edison? And so he really has had me on a journey of release that is so freeing. When we decide that there's something, which for me, it's God, that has better control for your life than you do, it's actually brings freedom. And so when we're designed to live and move and have our being in him, when we finally surrender that over to him, that's when freedom happens. But if, from the spirituality standpoint, if we're not connected to that, then I see it every day. People are physically bound to not being well because they're either obsessed with working out, or we have unhealthy emotional relationships with food. We're attached to things that we're not meant to be attached with, which separates us from how he created us to be, and in his design and in his nature. So recently, if any of you follow me on social media, you've seen recently my hashtag has been "Come Get Free," because strong is good. It's great. Strong feels good. Absolutely. And that's still very much a part of like my slogan of what we teach here. But really the aspect of Treco athletics, and I think truly being well, is being free. Like, because of what I do at the gym, I am free to go run sprints with my son. Because I have a healthy relationship with food, I can have donuts on Saturday, and it's not going to send me on some kind of a bender the entire rest of the day. Then I have to retrack and get back on track Monday through Friday, which is a whole accomplishment in itself that I've walked through with, and so, but a lot of that has stemmed from me finding my strength, my source of strength in not myself. The source of my strength has become making my spiritual life a priority, and then everything else has come into alignment underneath it, which is why there's freedom in the spiritual aspect of being well. And I think it's just a huge spot that people are missing in their life. And my heart is just for people to be free. And I know you know that because we talk about it all the time. And and I just know that the gate to freedom is through obedience and repentance. And it's a part of being well that I think a lot of people, like I just said, are just missing out on, what's available to them through being spiritually well grounded. So I don't know.
Right. And I think it just popped in my head that, it's not it shouldn't feel like an obligation,
No.
You shouldn't feel like it doesn't matter if you attend church. It doesn't matter if you, have, my dad, he goes to church sometimes, but sometimes it's just best for him to do his studies in his home that day.
Sure.
It doesn't, it shouldn't feel like, oh, I have to do this today. Obviously, you're in the wrong spot then.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I think we've had that's been a point in a lot of our conversations we've had on here too. If you feel like it's an obligation, or if you feel like it's a chore, then it's just the wrong spot for you. And keep your eyes open for the right one,
Yeah.
because they will come along, and that goes all along with it. Just be open,
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that, because what I would call that is doing things out of duty rather than love. And, sometimes I think in contrast to that though, too, Bridget, which I agree with, I think that if it's too hard and you're really striving, then it's either the wrong season or your heart isn't in the right place about it. I have people who just recognize, they're like, my life is just an absolute train wreck right now. I'm not going to be able to get to the gym 3 times a week. So can you just pause my membership and, or can you send me the workouts? I'll do them at home, which is you. But I've also had people that are like, hey, I got to take 3 months off and I'll be back, because they recognize that it's just not the right season. And I respect that. And I'm like, yeah, as long as you come back when it is the right season. But anyway, when things become out of duty rather than love, it is more stressful. When I start coming to the gym because I feel like I have to, yes. Is it more mentally challenging? Yeah. But part of making things a habit is doing them even when we don't feel like doing it, because eventually, and I'm talking about actually like eating healthy foods and getting to the gym, 3 times a week at least, going for the walk that you don't want to go on, doing the grounding, connecting with the Lord, doing the spiritual things that are going to improve your life. Like, it's not always rainbows and sunshines with me when I want to go sit with the Lord. Like, I'd rather just sit there and close my eyes and drift off to sleep. But what happens is, there's a love that begins to take over, because it becomes a relationship, a healthy one that both of us benefit from. And then it's something that like, you want to do every day, and it doesn't feel like duty anymore. But it's getting through that first awkward. I mean, it's like dating. Like, I'm truth be told, like, obviously I'm very single. I have been for 9 years. I'm afraid to go out on a date. I think it's going to be super awkward. I'm afraid of what I'm going to say, what I'm going to do, what do I wear? Are they going to like how I look, but like you go, and the person probably going to like you, otherwise they wouldn't want to go out with you anyways. But it's like any relationship, like you kind of like, you push through the awkwardness and you're like, oh, I really love this person. I want to be with them all the time. And that's really what it's like. So there are times of knowing your season, but also knowing that you're missing something, and that this is something that you need to really work on until it gets to the point where it's just like, man, why didn't I do this sooner? Which is,
right.
I think what everybody says when they start to see the results of implementing health and fitness habits, whether they're small or large ones, and they start to see the progress, which is really the motivation. When you see the progress, then you're motivated. And it's just the same way with, like, for me personally, it's the same way with my walk with the Lord. Like, I start to see things like, oh, I prayed about that last week and it just happened this week. Oh my gosh, like, this is amazing. And so it's, it builds your faith, which would be the ideal situation. Sometimes it's not always that quick, but yeah, that spiritual component is hard at first because it feels like work. It feels like a job, but all relationships are work. All things have sticky spots. All things are a little bit uncomfortable, but if you're willing to press through those, who doesn't love the results of pressing through the hard things?
Right.
Especially when especially when the outcome is better than when you started. I think we would all want to push through a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah. But yeah, knowing your season is a big part. And how do you know your season? Well, you spend time, right? In the quiet, you spend time in the morning, you spend time in your journal. You ask. So for me, it's, what he says in God's word, it says, ask, seek, and knock. And these things, seek first the kingdom, and then all these things will be added unto you. But it's asking, it's seeking, it's knocking. And then he typically gives me an answer. Sometimes it's not always what I like, but it's helpful in my life. So I think the spiritual component.
That's how it works. That's where we let go of the control.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And there's, gosh, the control thing is just so, I think it's hard,
Oh, for sure. Who doesn't want to control what happens, because we're just kind of built that way. We want to make sure we have the best outcome.
Yeah.
And it's just, even when you try to control it, it's often not the best outcome anyways.
Right.
So
yeah. Which is why it's so important, like we said earlier in the conversation, that spiritual aspect is where we give up control. Which leads us into freedom and giving up control, not to the point where you're just like, I'm going to do whatever they said, give up all control. You give up wanting things to be a certain way, but you still exercise self-control so that you can continue on in your path to truly being well. And there's always points from A to B that using that self-control takes a little bit more perseverance than other times. But, I think it's just something that, if people would implement that aspect of their life, there would be so much more freedom available to them. They would find it easier to exercise self-control. There wouldn't be this constant grasping and striving, and there would just be a lot more release from making poor health choices, especially when it comes to food and alcohol and addiction. So the spiritual component of what I do with my clients, I'm not out there being like, you got to get free in Jesus. But at the hardest of hearts, at some point, the conversation is going to come down to, like, do you want to be free? Because I know the man who can set you free, and his name is Jesus, and he wants you to be well. Because my job as a believer, as a follower of Christ, is to lead people to him, because I'm more concerned about the eternity of your soul than how you feel this side of heaven with the truth that I give you. And, the spiritual component of being well is at the hardest of hearts, my job here, this side of heaven. And so, when you're like, we're going to talk about spirituality, I was like, sweet. I can't do it with not sharing the gospel. I mean, I know that there are people out there who don't believe in God. They have this spiritual life of, the universe and its power, and, be connected to this thing and that. And I think that's people grasping for a true connection with the one true God. And I just, I pray that they have an encounter with him. But the spiritual component is definitely something that is a life changer. on so many dimensions. And once you start plugging that into every other area of the circle of life, I think that the circle of life dots end up evening out a lot better than when that aspect is not
Right.
even on the
Right.
radar.
Right.
So, so that's my probably more than 2 cents on the spiritual component of being well.
Oh, I think it was great.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you want to add to it, or personal experience? I know you've got a son that's pretty
I think
well
so.
grounded in it. Yeah. I love it. So what are we going to talk
Yeah.
about next week? We're going to flip the switch next week from spirituality. What's next on our agenda?
Oh, social life.
Social life.
That's one.
Awesome.
Social life. Yeah.
Man. Either some people want a little more social life, or some people are like, I'm going to make plans and I'm going to cancel. That's me. Some people have major like social life FOMO. So, oh gosh, this is such a good one. We spread ourselves too thin sometimes. We try to keep up.
Yep.
Now, is that
agree.
separate from social media,
a
or
good
is
one.
it social life like with people? Is it separate from social media?
I think it's social life with people.
In-person
social media is probably
life.
not healthy for anybody. Yeah.
Let's leave that out of the circle
life.
of life.
I mean, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, so
it
good.
Is definitely,
Anyway.
yeah. It is not in there.
Cool. All right. So tune in next week. We're going to talk about social life, which means in person with people, not behind your screen. If you have any questions about today's conversation, Bridget and I would be happy to answer them, or shoot them in the comments below. And we hope you guys have a great week. If you loved it, hit subscribe. If you don't subscribe, share it. We hope to see you next week. Have a good day.
Bye.